What if tarot wasn't a tool for predicting the future, but a random number generator that unlocks new ways to explore consciousness, our own psychology, and the hidden structures of reality? In this episode of Everyday Esoteric, we explore the practical usage and deeper philosophy of tarot that has shaped modern esotericism.
This is Everyday Esoteric. This could be the day your life can change.
Alex, can you tell me what you know about or think about tarot cards? As I understand it, you have little to no experience with them, maybe outside of like pop culture, and then we covered it in Chicken Kabbalah. So you're almost in the same spot as many of the listeners, I imagine. But let's take a little bit before so we can kind of see where everybody is at.
So, yeah, you're correct. My exposure is fairly limited, but it includes our exploration in Chicken Kabbalah and the Persona series of games, which, in Persona, the major arcana align with the various characters that you interact with in the game, which, from my understanding, isn't that much different from how astrological signs work. That said, there's a bunch of unique cards that make up the deck, and the decks come in all manner of themes. I know that, one uses them for fortune telling or impressing hot goth girls.
Yeah, so unfortunately, like goth girls, new age woo people, and the witchy side of the internet have taken this very beautiful thing and watered it down with misunderstanding. But to understand these cards, let's look at their history. So there is a lot of mystique surrounding the true origin of tarot, but one of the possible origins starts in Italy. The cards we're all familiar with date back at least to about the 15th century with an artist by the name of Bonif- Bonifacio Bembo. That is a name that somebody can have. Uh, Bonifacio Bembo, yeah, painted a set of cards for the Visconti family of Milan. The pictures Bembo painted would become the basis for the Italian game of tarocchi, comprising 4 suits of 14 cards each, plus 22 other scenes that would become known as the trumps. The trumps depicted popular medieval social types like the emperor or the pope, as well as virtues and homilies that pretty much anybody who was in that community at the time would have been familiar with. So cards like the wheel, temperance, and fortitude had imagery that society in time could understand just by looking at them. At the time, tarot seemed like nothing more than a card game, but over time it has become a near ubiquitous tool for divination worldwide.
So isn't this the Rider-Waite deck is? Like I think it's there's even like a little paper insert in the deck that tells a small story about the origins.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And we're about to cover specifically the Rider-Waite deck. But yes, that is the one, or the one that Bembo made is what the Rider-Waite deck is largely based off of. Going into tarot for the first time to learn how it is, I recommend to just use a Rider-Waite deck when you're starting. It's what everybody's familiar with. A lot of decks are just essentially reskins of this system, but with considerably less attention to symbolism and the detail. They were designed by Arthur Edward Waite, and the art was done by Pamela Coleman Smith. There's layers and layers of well thought out symbolism deeply baked into these cards to extract meaning from. Symbolism as a whole is a tool humans use to encapsulate complex ideas. Thousand words in a picture, so to speak. So when you get a collection of symbols, it tells a very elaborate story with nearly endless depth that becomes more and more profound as your knowledge base grows. There's a lot of beautiful decks out there, but they often fall on having to rely on what a book says about what any particular card means. And most of these decks are actually based on the Rider-Waite deck anyway. These artists who make these decks polish off, if not completely remove, the immediate ability to access the symbolism on the cards themselves. So that leaves you with having to know or refer to the widely, quote unquote, widely accepted interpretation. And honestly, that amputates a lot of the profound exploration one can do with their own intuition. With a Rider-Waite deck, you can infer a lot of the meanings just through the vibe. Literally, though, the artwork tells the stories, and sitting with a single card can tell you a lot about itself and you. With enough practice and familiarity, You can read them no different from a comic book or watching a movie. A lot of people are drawn to different decks with different types of art, but again, I highly recommend learning on the typical Rider-Waite deck because it's part of a living system. Not only is tarot a tool for divination, but it's the key to success in the mysteries of the Western esoteric traditions.
I heard that properly choosing a tarot deck involves the deck finding you more than anything, as it represents a connection that strengthens the divine power of the device, so to speak. But that could just be, extra woo on top of an already particularly wooful thing. The card reading is kind of like a storyboard used in movies and cartoons. The scenes are all there, but they aren't an entire script for the thing being filmed, leaving the room for that variability.
Yeah, and like I had other comments about this, um, but it just occurred to me not that long ago that when you get into anything, it doesn't matter if it's tarot, spirituality, or like sports or whatever, you only get into it when it's the right time in your life, when you are personally ready for it. So I think some of that, there might be some truth to that, where the deck finds you, and it's only when you're open to being interested in it that it truly strikes you enough to dive in. So like just the other day, a friend of mine gave me a deck of cards, and I had been meaning to get a set for my girlfriend Tatiana. It's nothing that I mentioned to anybody. It was just a thought that I had. But it just so happened my need was answered. But I don't think waiting for a deck has to come to you because only, fairy or Cthulhu themed decks resonate with you. The deck finding you, though, I think it is still a bit of a modern pop culture concept. There's not a hard and fast rule. These are just cards. It's just cardboard. But synchronicity, the seemingly meaningful connection between seemingly unrelated events, is a spooky mode of action. So yes, woo on top of woo, but there's got to be something to it, right? As far as a storyboard, that's also a kinda, because it's not always you know, it's not always or just quote unquote depicting events directly like movie scenes. If we stop only there, we lose a lot of depth. It's not like, say, the Five of Wands happens, and then the Two of Cups happens, and then the Seven of Swords, and then the Ten of Pentacles happens. If you know how to read, that does tell a story of a cute rom com, but you're limiting yourself to your successful reads if you stick with sequential reading like that. You may get something like the Five of Wands that depicts a playful fight. The wands are elemental fire, so they are concerned with the same space that inspiration and pure ideas exist before they become emotions or thoughts. So the Five of Wands isn't directly discussing a soccer game, but the general spirit behind those types of competitions. The other cards drawn would have their own concerns, but altogether it paints a larger picture. The cards would be more analogous to actors in the scene while also being the scene itself. An example might be, what's keeping me back from progressing at work? And if you draw the Five of Wands, it might be indicating competition, playing games, or something sports related. Then say you draw a Three of Pentacles. That indicates something to do with work. It's when two or more get together, it's that third thing. So it's safe to say that with these two cards, maybe you and a friend play too much, or you are competing with someone on your team for a higher position. Now, if we get a Two of Cups, we might infer that there's a romance or emotions between at least two people that are getting in the way. But we can also see that the element of air is missing. So the situation might be missing communication, or someone's too in their head. Otherwise, we see that the Five of Wands is explaining at the conceptual level, the Two of Cups tells what's going on at the archetypal and emotional level, and the Three of Pentacles is showing what's at the physical and manifest level. But again, you're taking a stochastic sample, basically a taste of the soup of life in the present moment. There's sausage being made of this thing that we call life, and a divinatory means like tarot gives us a peek inside the machine. Probability is going to guide you to whatever it is that you'll see in that moment. The probability of further out events grows drastically and becomes less probable with time. So don't ask, will I be married by 35 if you're in your early 20s? Ask, what is keeping me from being married? A question like this will allow the cards to help you reveal a lot about yourself, so you can make the changes to increase the probability that you'll be married by 35 if that's actually what your goal is. Did you have any other comments after that?
Um,
or no, it just goes
Well, I
straight
mean, I
into
think
divination.
when I was like listening to you talk and combining these different things, th they're definitely very vague sentiments that when it comes to the pentacles and the cups and these elements and everything and how they relate to emotion or work partnership teams, uh, that's very, like I said, they're very vague concepts, and I understand that like the purpose is to get you to then think about these things from a perspective of their association with each other in the to try and gather knowledge about what the current situation might
Hmm.
be. So, say for example, you do have some. We'll go back to your example. What's keeping me from progressing at work? And you have that there's something to do with partnership and teams. Um, it's something to do with competition, playing games, and you take into the idea that okay, maybe I am, you know, dicking around too much at work, or whatever. Somebody is approaching my door, so I'm going to have to probably deal with that. I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So, did you want to finish your thought that you had about the last thing, or just go
Let
into the
me
next?
yes, let me re so okay, I remember where I was going with this. So I'm thinking about how you're describing this general question of what's keeping me back from progressing at work. And you draw these cards, and these cards provide you with these, like you said, Five of Wands, the Three of Pentacles, and Two of Cups. And they indicate things like competition, something to do with work, partitions, team, or competition, playing games, something sports related,
Yeah.
work, partnership, or teams, romance, or emotions, and how you kind of you get the wands and the pentacles, and you can see games and work and your relationship of that being possibly playing dicking around at work, playing too many games at work. You shouldn't have been playing ultimate frisbee or something, or there's somebody who's in a direct competition with you for something at work that that could be the case. And then you throw in romance or emotions and how that sort of twists the narrative additionally in terms of your interpretation. um, and that like I know we're going to talk about, not to spoil anything, but that we're going to talk about it as a source of divination. But that it kind of it doesn't necessarily feel like it's as much a divination so much as it is a a vehicle that you can drive to let you think about things in their relationship to each other as contextualized to your experience, and that when you do that, it provides your brain the stepping stone to come to different conclusions than you may have been already ruminating on.
Yes, that's it. That is it. Encapsulate it. Like divination is 100%, like, in my opinion, in my experience, in my opinion, is not what, for lack of a better term, pop culture makes it out to be. It is exactly that. It is using various symbols or symbolism to essentially spark ideas, and then everything that you said. It's up to you to find the causal connections because it's what's meaningful to you based off of your lived experience and the knowledge that you have. Now, I do think, like, metaphysically there is a way that you can extract external information because everything in theory could be an extension of you, but like the most practical way in that this works, in my opinion, it is just that this exactly how you explained it.
Well, and I want to say that, and you can probably splice this in at a later point if you want to put this sentiment at like a better part that makes more sense contextually, but that obviously you're not doing divination, but you mentioned external input and or something external to you, and there if you have not thought of a possibility when it comes to your particular situation, and you play your cards from this deck, and that the cards themselves illuminate to you some possibility that you had not known, that then you have gained external knowledge by being given the ability to realize some possibility that had not been realized. And now, and the existence of that possibility not being realized didn't change the fact that that possibility existed. You have now just been connected to it via the cards.
Yeah, exactly. Like you just described, like very intellectually explained my understanding of it. We can close the episode. But no, we're gonna go ahead. No,
That's why I said, like, if I think I'm getting it, or if I that
no.
sentiment was getting it, I wanted to make sure it was pack and parceled. So if you wanted to cut it out and put it somewhere that makes more sense from a punctuation perspective, we can do the rest of the episode, and then you put it somewhere else, and then you can be like, I'm proud of you, A plus, Alex, you got it.
So you have that nugget of wisdom from Alex. The current understanding, or my current understanding of divination, is to seek guidance or foretell the future using some type of mysticism or magic. This makes tarot, like we had just talked about, this makes tarot seem a lot spookier than it might be. Fortunes might be told, but understand that divination is using the world around you to gain insight into the patterns of everyday life. One might tell the weather from how the birds fly, or while other people consult the patterns of planetary movements. When one does a reading, they are taking a stochastic assessment of a given moment, meaning they're taking a random probabilistic sampling of that given moment in time, and that sample is deciphered by the reader. The deck acts as a seemingly simple but advanced little machine. It's kind of just like a random number generator, where the cards have meaning, but it's up to you to reflect on how the cards apply to your situation.
People see meaning in all kinds of things. I watched a Bob's Burgers episode, and Teddy, the handyman character, is fairly superstitious and constantly looking for signs, meaning in various things. Some of the meteor shower, some kind of meteor shower was happening, and Teddy was thoroughly convinced that something involving the shower would tell him some sort of universe wisdom about his relationship that he had with this lady that he was pursuing. And Bob meets his eyes at some point with a seal in the water for a minute about after spending the whole episode saying that like Teddy is completely crazy and it's just a bunch of hubbub. My point being that you can interpret anything in a multitude of ways, and there really isn't a correct way to see meaning. Looking at art is another example. Not everyone is going to see meaning, and when people do, they may not all agree on what that meaning is.
Yeah, and then just like the Danny DeVito meme from like It's Always Sunny, like, oh, I get it, I get it. That's when it's your time, you might have that type of reaction, but
Oh,
bottom
I thought you
line,
were talking about the who's when he's in the white wig and he's just like, this
yeah,
is
like
magnificent.
like yes, like this is magnificent, but um, more like when he watches Mac do the big dance number.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember that.
So,
It's a good one.
but yeah, meaning is just kind of what it is. It's all just a matter of interpretation. Some event or person can have some intended meaning, but the perception of the event creates a new world of meaning by whoever is the perceiver. We can't judge someone's interpretation of meaning, but we can assign different values to things. But how do you assign value to something you don't understand? Just don't yuck someone else's yum if it doesn't make sense to you. In the case of these cards, the cards have a defined meaning, but how you relate to it and understand it will be unique to you, and that influences the interpretation. The Nine of Swords means whatever it means, but how Alex and I relate to it would be different at any given moment. This card is about how, on the surface, this card is about how thoughts affect us emotionally and cause suffering. You and I, you, the listener, and I have different fears, anxieties, and concerns. My Nine of Swords could be about finances, while yours could be about agoraphobia. But by next week, my Nine of Swords could be about anxiety about the state of the world, and yours could be anxiety surrounding your spouse. The meaning is consistent, but the relationship that you have to the card is what changes. I had a hard time grasping the mechanics of divination until I began to study the Chinese philosophy and divination of Tao and the I Ching. The universe has whatever the universe has whatever story it has that is unraveling, a flow, if you will. Not that the story is determined, but more like a book being written, carved out by the natural flow of cascading awareness. I don't even think that's the best metaphor, and the Tao itself will explain that what is explainable is not the Tao, or what is explainable is not is not reality. The Tao explains existence is it's just simply how things are. It's just the way that it is. Kind of like that. Isn't that neat? Like you can tell something by how it is. Yeah.
It's an
Uh,
aspen.
yeah, it's an aspen. How do you know? Because of how it is. When you use a divination tool, you are augmenting your ability to experience, quote unquote, the way in which things are. You're only getting a little peek of that moment in the universe through the lens of the tool. It's shifting your perspective. You are observing a tool that's observing you so you can better observe yourself. Metaphysically, it's a bit like wearing glasses that let you experience the present moment drastically different. It cuts through a bunch of the nonsense, and you peep at something from an intellectual, emotional, or conceptual level by using this physical thing. And this physical thing becomes a gateway. When using tarot, it doesn't mean anything is set in stone or necessarily predicting the future, but it is saying, here's a sample of the now. The symbolism present in the symbolism present in the cards are well thought out and manicured, but it's up to the reader to reflect on how it's meaningful to them. Using the book analogy again, reading cards is like reading where the unfinished story is currently at. The future telling side of divination supposes that what has been written will influence the coming events, which makes sense. Trees come before logs. Everything that will happen is everything that will happen is a direct result of something else that has happened before. So I theorize that you're taking a sample from the current predicted possible future. It might make some sense if I say that a tarot reading is like asking the infinite improbability drive what course you're on. You ask, and it spits out a glyph that you can use as a map. Divination, if nothing else, strengthens how you relate to yourself and your world. If you can't figure out how a card relates to you, you may want to reflect on how it is that you relate to things in general. These cards will expose the blind spots you have of yourself very quickly, but they do so in a way but they do so in the same way that running shoes will expose how out of shape you are. It's not the shoes making you out of shape, or the or in this case the cards limiting your self-awareness, but you use these tools to fix those problems. It's less spooky to think of it this way, but a tarot deck is just a deck of cards. The cards are a powerful tool that work as intended, but it's simply a tool nonetheless.
So, follow me for a second, listeners. There are 78 unique cards with two possible positions when one does a reading and uses this tool, which makes for 156 unique items, so to speak, that can be identified. I did a Google search on what a typical reading might entail as far as card draws are concerned, and the Celtic Cross uses 10 cards. This means that there are 1.75 times 10 to the 15, or 1 quadrillion 750 trillion, possible combinations of cards that could appear given a sufficient shuffle. If you wanted to see all those combinations, assuming it took you 30 seconds to shuffle and draw the cards each time, it would take you 1.66 billion years to do. This represents an unfathomable amount of possible readings that you could do at any one time. My understanding of how one could choose to interface with this mechanism is to assume that all things are connected and that the universe and everything in it interacts with each other in ways ranging from catastrophic to anatomically subtle. Given this, one could then place some faith in the cards that appear during a reading as being influenced by the greater will, Elden Ring reference, of everything around you in the deck. Once you add in that you as the reader of the cards gives even more variability to the reading, one could rightfully feel that very particular and unique wisdom could be derived from this seemingly innocuous ritual.
And I don't think the cards have to even be related to a greater will, at least at the moment in the time. Like to my understanding, yes, that is kind of how it works, but stripping away the metaphysics, it can be like putting the they live glasses on. You just see what is there. You can like it or dislike it, you can agree or disagree, whatever the case is. In this case, what makes something true or untrue is your understanding. The why is totally up for interpretation. I don't know why exactly these things work the way that they do, but sometimes you do have the data points that make it feel influenced by something greater, which, that might be the case. It might be aliens or spirits guiding the cards. I just don't usually think that that's the case. Maybe if it fits within your framework, it doesn't for me. For me, it's akin to taking a temperature or a blood pressure reading, and I don't really worry about how or why it works. I just know that it does. It's an instrument that tells us something about my experience beyond what I can perceive. It's just it's just as psychological as it is spiritual. Tarot is definitely sitting in that metaphysical quantum nonsense camp that creates a multitude of interpretations and reactions. And if we chase the how it works rabbit hole enough, we're bound to have a door of truth slammed in our face like a Zen master's cone.
Martin, could you how do you feel about just about the numbers I gave you?
Astronomical, to put it very simply. My first reaction is that with the 70 whatever combination, 72 combinations or 78, sorry. Um not sorry. My reaction to it is that the 78 unique cards, there's more of those than there are letters in the English language. So that means that there's more ways to describe things than the letters that we have to try to spell something.
I mean, I'd like to also kind of point out that the Rider-Waite deck has it has existed for how many years did you say it's actually like bothered to exist? 1857 was when Mr. Waite was even born.
In its current like iteration, yeah. So since
But
the
yeah, but even
late
so,
1800s, early 1900s.
yeah. So okay, so even if you want to say as far back, like what did you say the history was? It went back how far?
It goes back into 15th century. Yeah. Mr. Bembo did the cards back in the 15th century in Milan.
Okay, so 15th century, that's 500 years from right now, right? 500, 600, give or take. Doesn't really matter because the human history really only spans roughly 300,000 years, right?
Right.
So even if humanity had been doing these for 300,000 years, it, and I don't even have to venture to say that even if a million people had been doing it for 300,000 years, they probably would not even have begun to scratch the surface of all the possible readings that can come out of this when you look at that 6.66 billion years it would take to complete an entire viewing of the deck and all of its unique outcomes.
That's insane. Like,
You
just,
like if you properly shuffle it every
yeah,
single time, you will never see the same cards come out in the exact same ways ever again.
that's insane. Like,
Like you don't live long enough. Nobody lives long enough. The human race hasn't lived long enough to see every single one of these cards. It's the same thing with a deck of playing cards, like your standard 52 from Casino. Like if you shuffle that properly, you are likely viewing a shuffling that has never been before seen in the entirety of the existence of those cards.
I don't know what to do with
And
that.
I'm not talking just
That's
from
cool, though.
that deck.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
talking about all decks ever.
yeah. Frick. You know. So, yeah, I
But
mean, but
I
then,
think we talked about this we talked about this in a similar episode where you were trying the people were trying to find truth in probability that goes without explanation or truth from probability that defies rational normal sort of explanation and can only really sort of go into the realm of like what would now be seen as irrational, the parapsychology stuff,
yeah,
and the alleged pseudoscientific part of it. Which the only part of it that's pseudoscientific is that it doesn't have any sort of empirical connection that can be drawn to some sort of concrete or physical material purpose, right? If somebody is able to guess all these different occurrences of things right by however many different in some percentage that defies what should be possible, then it does beg the question, what exactly is going on here that allows somebody to defy the probabilistic expectations. In regular science, when you see something like that show up in particle physics, you start to wonder if there isn't some other particle causing something to fuck happen in that thing. Like
yeah.
it it doesn't just the results that you get from empirical data are what they are, and you can interpret them in whatever which ways you want, but they don't doesn't change the fact that this is what happened, and it has to have a cause and effect. Everything has a cause and effect, and even these most mystical of things still has that,
Yes,
like, whether we want to
absolutely.
talk about faith or empiricism or science and religion, everything has cause and effect. There is that is like an unavoidable sort of truth among everything that humanity bothers to philosophize on
Yeah,
is the
something
cause and
has to
effect
happen for
relationship.
something else to happen.
And it's
Just whatever that is.
it kind of, yeah, and it kind of comes back to this whole thing where if you listener want to assume that the cause of, well, and maybe we don't have to go into this, but let's say that the cause of like why the cards are presenting themselves in the way that they are for you at this given time is for a reason, and then you get to observe the effects and use them to embody or internalize whatever it is that they're delivering to you. It's completely reasonable.
Yeah, yeah, like just because like I am exhibiting it from my understanding of it and through a kabbalistic lens or perspective. Um, but with cards that make that many possible combinations in a universe that has as many combinations as it has, my meaning or my truth isn't inherently your truth, you know?
Right. And then you throw that astronomical number at it, and the human invariability, like I already said, the human invariability of it, in terms of like your possibly non-deterministic way of interpreting it, almost gives it this infiniteness to it.
Yeah, like a
It's not truly infinite,
like,
but
like a good
it is as
way.
infinite as we can really care about.
Yeah, kind of like I don't know if it's a good way to look at it or think about it, but you're doing whatever in that moment with the cards, and you get what you get, and they're in your hands. But everything in the universe has led up to that moment. Everything that's happened has had to happen its specific way for you to be there with those cards at that moment. I don't care if it's the production of the cards. I don't care if it's a production of the house that you're in. I don't care if it's a production of your physical body or the sequence of actions, emotional, physical, mental, that you have taken to get to that point where you're reading it. And to me, that's where I find one of the like some solace in the grander meaning of doing my card readings is, you know, you're not going to get a different card reading. That's what you get in that moment, and that's what it means. Whatever it means, like how you relate to it is going to be another thing. But just the weird machinations or the infinite machinations that brought all of it together into that moment. To me, that's profound.
Well, I think it really is, right? It's whatever flavor you want to provide for it, but I think the fact of the matter is that it is the closest thing that you, a human, can get to being able to play with the infinite as a thing. It's all well and good for me to sit here and be like, oh, the all the natural numbers go to infinity. There's infinite of them, or like, and in between each natural number, there's an infinite amount of real numbers to make whatever the hell that means. But like none of that. And sure, maybe that does have some sort of like actual part that matters in the scheme of the universe and whatever. But like, you don't give a shit because you can't do anything with it. But
Yeah,
these physical cards, you can hold these cards, right? You can look at the imagery of the cards. You can put them together. You can make a freaking house of cards, smack the house of cards down, and look at what cards show up when you smack the house of cards down. If you really wanted like super turbo random,
yeah.
and it's it is very it's a very beautifully crafted tool that you can use to interact with the infinite.
And kind of funny that you mentioned that going infinite library, the Banach-Tarski paradox, all that. I've very convinced through my own personal gnosis that those are interpolations of explaining the same phenomena as like the Sephiroth. And when you get into like the Kabbalah and the Hermetic mysticism, whatever, like it is not uncommon to be able to create an entire temple just using your tarot cards because of whatever the symbolism itself is. So yeah, in theory, these cards contain the entirety of the entire universe in them. Kabbalah is instrumental in understanding tarot and vice versa. You do not need the Kabbalah to read tarot, but at least understand that the meanings behind these cards are directly related to the Kabbalistic tree of life. I don't know why I have that there. Oh, even though some grug at dawn of history did have to start making arbitrary assignments. I think, some Christians pronounce Grug as God, though. That's a little funny aside. Tarot, we have 22 trumps.
The archetypal caveman.
The archetypal, just the origin of humanity. In
Yes.
tarot, we have 22 trumps called the major arcana, and 56 others called the minor arcana. In tarot, the major arcana sets the tone and principles. They are about much wider concepts of your reality tunnel. Each of the 22 trumps depict various archetypes and symbols and hint at their alchemical and astrological contents. We're deep in symbolism while we're in the realm of the Tree of Life. The major arcana also tell the story of the Fool, which represents you and your archetypal journey through your life. When superimposed onto the Tree of Life, the major arcana connects particular pairs of the spheres. The 10 spheres of the Tree of Life correspond to the numbered minor arcana. Each sphere has a whole world unto itself. Try to imagine the spheres like this. The spheres act as little bubbles or nodes that hold a museum of archetypes. For, for example, between sphere 9 Yasad and sphere 10 Malkuth, we can find card 21, the world. The world, which as a card kind of represents a birth canal and the birth or manifestation of things into the physical world. If you're familiar with the symbolism of the moon, moon is also like related to Yasad, so it reinforces that kind of birth canal, like feminine archetype sort of thing. Anyway, briefly exploring number 4, also known as Chesed. Chesed corresponds to wealth and success, and with the planet Jupiter. So in the number 4 cards, we see representations of stability and groundedness, but we also see the negative effects of ego. If we if we look at the 4th card of the major arcana, we find the Emperor, the bearded man giving stern dad energy on a cement throne. It's likewise associated with Jupiterian gods such as Zeus, who took over his father, or like Thor, who wants to be his father. It's a very patriarchal and benevolent sphere, and it seems, for whatever reason, to have a penchant for storm gods. The number 4 has a cool history. The number 4 has a cool history in this symbolic whip. Chesed is the 4th Sephira. It is represented by the planet and Roman god Jupiter. Jupiter is called Zeus in Greek mythology. The alchemical sign for tin and the astrological sign for Jupiter is a stylized Greek zeta. This stylized Greek zeta is effectively it's shaped to look like the number 4. This isn't necessarily the history of the number 4 itself, but I'm going to take my coincidences where I can get them. So when we pull a numbered card, 4 in this case, we're exploring these types of concepts expressed through an elemental layer. Fire is the layer of emanation, water is the world of creation, air is the world of formation, and earth is the world of manifestation. The Emperor in this example may be found between Chokmah and Tifereth, spheres 2 and 6, but also shows us the broad strokes of fourness, quote unquote. If the numbered pip cards are like putting something under a microscope, the major arcana is like looking at a map. They concern broader and more nuanced concepts that underlie or oversee within the reading itself. Trying to cement this idea one last time, if we look at the Magician card, card number 1, we see that each of the 4 aces are depicted on this card. So through the Magician, we can learn about the qualities of oneness and what it means to harness the aces, or more practically, harness each element. We understand that both the aces and the magicians are the sphere of Kether, the first sphere where everything will emanate from. Aces themselves are an inspiration. They're just a pure emotion, a pure idea. They are just the seed.
Before you go any farther, I'm just looking at. This shouldn't be the thing that I'm thinking about the whole time, but I'm just thinking about Persona the whole time, and I feel like as far as some of my, and you can cut this particular part out,
Okay.
but I feel like as far as some of my other relations that I've drawn with a lot of this stuff, that Persona is maybe one of the few like actually appropriate pieces of media that makes any sense to do any sort of like I don't want to say I'm allowed to explore it from a
Yeah.
perspective of like respect, but like I think you understand that there's a lot of that it is a pretty decent art form that's being
Yes.
used here when it comes to like how they bother to do the tarot with
Yes.
their major arcana mappings to the characters. And like as you're talking about these, my in my head I do not associate the thing that I immediately associate is when you say these things, I think of the characters from Persona 4. And then when you start explaining different parts of it, I'm looking at the cards and I'm like looking at the different parts of the card and I'm trying to make connections between those characters
Yeah.
and their stories and their personalities with that of the cards.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting. Like it's something that I don't know. Again, and you can cut this particular part out
No,
if
this is
whether or not
great.
you'd find it I just mean from a perspective of like the meta of the podcast
Yeah.
perspective. If you wouldn't find it appropriate for me to, and if you wanted to do it with me, to do explorations into these characters from the perspective of the tarot
I think that would be great. Like that's
in some sort of thing.
like in all the talk of symbolism and stuff that I've done, it it seemed like I don't want to say that there was a resistance, but like you couldn't like you understood the door was there, but this is the door that you're going through. And it's cool to see you make this connection because this is how like that archetypal symbolism works is like yes I'm talking about these things but this is just the doorway into like these other lines of thoughts and you know and almost like portals into different thoughts and different forms of media and stuff. It's quite the multiverse when you get into like esoteric or I guess you know getting into the video games as well. But yeah,
Right,
that
because I
would be
mean I
cool.
know like because I know that like video games a lot of the time I don't want to say that they put a bad taste in the mouth when it comes to like exploration from a perspective of things that you could consider serious, but like because a lot of times video games are purely for fun. Like, then you can have versus sometimes you've got books that you can read that are like, oh, it's fun to
Yeah.
read, but it's like, oh, if you read To Kill a Mockingbird, there's a lot more moralistic and ethical things going on here that is meant to be gotten across and explained that
Right.
the author is still providing an entertaining vehicle for. That video games kind of have a lot more of a visceral point towards the entertaining vehicle versus the meaningful point that's trying to drawn across, or that there is a it's harder to see the forest for the trees in something that a an author is trying to do in this case when it comes to like how all the complexities of these characters is very important to the story and how
Mm.
they all relate over to what their springboard is, which seems to be the tarot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, cuz you were looking at a way to like bring video games into the fold and I think that would be like a very good way to do that. And it gives you an excuse to
Well,
replay it if you want.
which I will probably have to because they're doing a remake of it again, which is how you know it's a popular game if they're remaking it for a third time. But the I think it's just because like a lot of video games has made up a large part of my life, and so
Right.
media, a lot of my media and or like sort of life association has to do with video games, and so I will relate it over to video game media out of circumstance. And in this particular case, the Persona games and Persona 4 specifically is very important to me, and so I have a lot of very like I used the word visceral before, but I used to have a lot of very visceral reactions when you say these arcana names to these characters that I grew attached to and that I understood the stories of.
Yeah. Yeah. That's and whatever you do with that, like I'll be there with you to do it. I think that's great. I'd love to see that materialize. Like those moments that you can find entry into like cuz I can understand how you can feel like you find it hard to engage with the material, but if this is one of the things that like like fuck yeah, you know? Like it's completely relevant, we're in sync on it, all that, you know. So, deep down the rabbit hole. If aces are the spark or inception and tens are the manifestation. No, hold on. Aces are the spark or inception of something, and tens are going to be the manifestation. We see the trials and tribulations of the concept going through its growth. Each suit tells a cyclical story, and we can see the same story being told from the elemental perspectives of each suit. The story follows numbers 1 through 10, and it can be read as the wands and it can be read as the wand perspective, the cup perspective, the sword perspective, or the pentacle perspective. Each of these elements are also the domain of a court card. Think of the court cards like chapters in the story, but each suit has its own court cards. So you can read these chapters not only from the perspective of the court card, but also by their segmented elemental narration of the chapter. So kings are fire, queens are water, knights are sword, and pages are earth. Understanding the court cards can be difficult if you try to apply too much like Aristotelian logic to it. There's a lot to unpack with the court cards. They aren't quite cut and dry. Kabbalists were commentating on, you know, it's a commentary on the watcher watching the watcher who watches the watcher that is ultimately still watching the watcher. The court cards have these elemental associations, then are associated with specific spheres on the tree. So, for example, 2 is king, 3 is queen, 4 through 9 are the knights, and then 10s are pages. It's the story of the Sefer Yetzirah where 1 notices itself and becomes 2 and 3 and then so on. There might even be an analogy here to the Titans Gaia and Uranus, the Hellenic Olympians, and even the mortals. But in this case, everything originates in the sphere of Kether and multiplies from there. The king and queen are 2 halves of the same whole, and the knight and page are their creations. When nothing noticed itself, it created Kether, the one of one, the original recognition. Kether is the idea, the thought by the original thing to exist, and the thought fractalizes into the reality we perceive to exist. The court cards can be seen to represent the maturation of whatever the ace is. It's the life cycle of a given concept or idea. They are lessons upon lessons in this mystic tradition. With a little attention, we can use these cards to climb to new heights of knowledge and wisdom. Every time you feel like you have reached the ceiling or floor of an understanding, chances are you haven't. It's a great analog and companion to the human experience and a portal to understanding yourself and the world in deeper and more profound ways. So I think this is probably enough to chew on for right now. When I revisit the tarot, I'd love to show you how to conduct a reading and explain the pathworking meditations. Let us know what you think about that. I think it would be cool if Alex and I would take a card and do some examination to see what we can extract from it. But before we depart, as our as our resident stand-in for the audience in this episode, would you mind sharing how your understanding or perspective of the cards has changed over the episode? Maybe there's misconceptions that got cleared up or waters that have been made even murkier.
No, I think what, and you may have like wrote the question from the perspective of how you were expecting to, walk me through this and everything, and not have it maybe make as much sense as it did. And so, but that in and of itself is that's an understanding and perspective that I have on it. That I was able to a lot quicker understand where it is that you're coming from with it, understand what it exists as far as like how we talked about from the tool perspective, where it lies in the history of humanity and what it exactly does for one, and its place in the mindfulness aspect of things that you can practice.
Yeah, because like to me, it can seem convoluted, but I think once you get the basics of it, it can be a pretty simple machine. It's just that the depths of it you can mine near infinitely.
Well, yeah, and I think maybe that's just one of those things where you don't hand wave it, you just accept that part, and you just tuck it back away in a pocket and just kind of keep going on, and you just don't let it bother you, and you don't let it stop you, kind of thing. Well, because I mean, you're smiling because I can see you because we
Yeah.
have a camera and everything, but like I'm thinking about it from the perspective of somebody who thinks it's hocus pocus, and the not me. I don't think it's hocus pocus. Like I've already expounded on the fact that like there's something to be said about the very large probabilistic and weird nature of like what actually lies behind. I don't want to say the answers beyond the numbers, but the answers behind the cards.
Yeah.
That there are aspects of it that have trouble with rationality and empiricism. And there are also concepts in here that are very metaphysically uncomfortable, like the infinite and things like void, and also and those types of things. And it is something that you can simply accept and, like I said, put it in a pocket and engage with this as it is for what it is, as Martin likes to tell me, um, so that you can see what it is that it can offer you.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what more there is to say about it other than you know, you guys give us your feedback. Tell us like what your experience with tarot cards is, good or bad. Tell us what your thoughts are on it. Tell us if you think it's hocus pocus and why. But other than that, I think we're good to wrap up for the week.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys next time.
All right. So like us on the internet, touch us, on the subscribe button
On the
if you
internet.
on the internet, only on the internet, please.
Don't touch us in real life.
Please don't.